You know what nobody tells you when you start a vegetable garden? They make it sound like this peaceful, rewarding hobby where you spend your weekends puttering around the yard and your evenings harvesting baskets of beautiful produce. And maybe for some people it starts that way, but for most of us, here's what actually happens. You go all in during spring. You build the beds, you amend the soil, you start seeds indoors under grow lights, you transplant everything on the perfect weekend in May, and for about 3 weeks, it looks incredible. Then, life kicks in, work gets busy, the kids have summer schedules. It is 92 degrees and humid, and the last thing you want to do after a long day is spend an hour weeding and watering and checking for bugs. So the garden slides. You skip a few days, then a week. Then you walk out there one Saturday morning and the weeds are knee-high, the tomatoes have blight, and the lettuce bolted 2 weeks ago. Sound familiar? It happened to me more times than I care to count. But what if I told you that a productive year-round food garden does not require hours of work every day? That the most consistent gardeners I know, the ones pulling food out of their yards 12 months a year, spend about 5 minutes a day on it? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to set up and maintain a garden that feeds you all year long on just a few minutes of daily attention. And stick around to the end, because I will share a simple 1-minute evening habit that can genuinely double your results without adding any real work to your day. Let us get into it. The idea of a 5-minute garden is not about cutting corners or doing the bare minimum. It is about designing a system that does most of the work for you, so that the time you do spend is focused and effective. The good news is, this approach actually produces better results than the weekend warrior method most of us default to. Once you understand why that is true and how to set it up, you will never go back to the old way. So let us start with the most important shift you need to make, and it has nothing to do with plants or soil. Here is the honest truth about why most home gardens fail. It is not bad soil. It is not the wrong variety. It is not pests or disease. It is inconsistency. A garden can survive imperfect conditions, but it cannot survive being ignored for 10 days and then getting a frantic 4-hour rescue session on Saturday. Plants respond to steady, daily attention far more than they respond to occasional bursts of intense effort. A 5-minute check every single morning will always outperform a 5-hour marathon once a week. I learned this the hard way. For years, I was a weekend gardener. I would do all my watering, weeding, feeding, and inspecting in one big block on Saturday morning, and every week I was playing catch-up. The weeds had a 6-day head start. The tomato hornworm I could have picked off on Tuesday had already stripped half a branch by Saturday. The pepper plant that needed water on Wednesday was stress-wilted by the time I got to it. I was working harder than I needed to and getting worse results than I should have, all because my effort was concentrated instead of distributed. The Amish gardeners I have spent time around in Lancaster County understand this instinctively. Their morning garden walk is not an optional extra. It is woven into the rhythm of the day, the same as feeding the animals or putting coffee on. It takes minutes, not hours. But because it happens every single day without exception, problems never get a chance to compound. A weed pulled at 2 inches tall takes 2 seconds. That same weed pulled at 12 inches tall takes 30 seconds and has already stolen a week of water and nutrients from the plants around it. Multiply that across an entire garden, and the math becomes obvious. Daily minutes beat weekly hours every single time. So before we talk about what to plant or how to set up your beds, I need you to make one commitment. 5 minutes every morning. Not when you get around to it, not when you feel like it. Every morning. Tie it to something you already do. If you drink coffee on the porch, your garden walk starts when you pick up that mug. If you let the dog out first thing, you walk through the garden on the way back inside. Make it automatic and make it non-negotiable, and everything else I'm about to teach you will work. Skip this step, and no amount of planning will save you from the same cycle of enthusiasm and neglect that burns most gardeners out. Now let us talk about how to design your garden so that 5 minutes a day is actually enough. Because the truth is, if your garden is poorly laid out, 5 minutes will not cut it. You will be walking back and forth, hunting for the hose, bending down to weed between rows that are too narrow, and spending half your time just getting oriented. The design has to do the heavy lifting. First, keep it tight. I know it is tempting to plant a huge garden, especially when those seed catalogs show up in January and everything looks incredible. But a smaller, well-designed garden will outproduce a large, neglected one every single time. For a family of 2 to 4, I recommend starting with no more than 100 to 150 square feet of growing space. That is roughly a 10 by 12 foot area or 3 raised beds that are 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. That is enough to grow a serious amount of food and small enough to maintain in minutes. Second, raise your beds. If you are gardening in ground and you are over 50, I am going to be direct with you. Raised beds will change your life. Building beds that are 18 to 24 inches tall eliminates most of the bending and kneeling that makes garden maintenance feel like a chore. You can sit on the edge of a 24-inch bed and comfortably reach into the center. When your body does not hurt after 5 minutes of garden work, you are far more likely to actually do it every morning. The width should be no more than 4 feet so you can reach the center from either side without stepping into the bed and compacting the soil. Third, mulch everything. And I mean everything. Every square inch of exposed soil in your garden should be covered with 2 to 3 inches of organic mulch. Straw, shredded leaves, or wood chips all work. Mulch does 3 critical jobs that save you enormous amounts of time. It suppresses weeds, so instead of spending 20 minutes weeding every few days, you are pulling 1 or 2 strays per week. It retains soil moisture, which means you water less often and the soil stays consistently moist between waterings. And it insulates the soil temperature, keeping roots cooler in summer and warmer in the shoulder seasons. I cannot overstate how much time mulching saves. Before I mulched consistently, weeding was easily the biggest time drain in my garden. After I started putting down a thick layer of straw every spring, my weeding time dropped by at least 80%. That alone is what makes a 5-minute garden possible. Fourth, put your water source close. If you have to drag a hose 60 feet from the side of the house every time you water, that is not a 5-minute task. Position your garden within easy reach of a spigot or run a dedicated hose to the garden and leave it there all season. Better yet, set up a simple drip irrigation system on a battery-powered timer. A basic drip kit for 3 raised beds costs about $40 to $60 at any garden center, and a battery timer is another $20. Total investment of maybe $80, and your watering becomes completely automatic. The system waters your garden at 6 in the morning every day, whether you remember or not. That alone eliminates the single most time-consuming daily task and ensures your plants never miss a drink. Fifth, group your plants by need, not by type. Most people plant all the tomatoes in one bed, all the peppers in another, and so on. But a smarter approach is to group plants by how much water and attention they need. Put your thirsty, high-maintenance crops, like tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers together in the beds closest to your water source and your daily walking path. Put your low-maintenance crops like herbs, garlic, and root vegetables in the beds that are a little further out. This way, your 5-minute daily check focuses naturally on the plants that need the most attention, and the easy crops mostly take care of themselves. Now, what I have been sharing with you so far is the foundation. I put together a complete guide that lays the whole thing out for you. It is called the 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned about regrowing food from scraps, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this week. It covers which scraps are genuinely worth your time and which ones to skip. It walks you through the exact setup and methods so you are not guessing. And it includes a full 30-day calendar, so you know exactly what to do each day. Click the link in the description right below this video, just scroll down a little and you will see it. Or if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, you can take out your phone, open up your camera like you're going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think you'll be glad you grabbed it. All right, let us talk about what you are actually doing during those 5 minutes each morning, because this is where the whole system comes together. Your daily routine has 4 parts, and once you have done it a few times, it flows naturally and takes almost no thought. Part 1 is the scan. This takes about 60 seconds. You walk the length of your beds and just look. You are not touching anything yet. You are scanning for anything that looks different from yesterday. A wilted plant, a chewed leaf, a weed poking through the mulch, a tomato that has changed color. You are building a mental snapshot of your garden's condition, and over time, you develop an eye for what is normal and what is not. The Amish gardeners I learned from call this reading the garden, and it is the single most valuable skill you can develop. Most problems in a garden give you visual warnings days before they become serious. A plant that is slightly droopy at 7 in the morning is telling you it needs water before it becomes a crisis at 2 in the afternoon. A single aphid on a pepper leaf today is a heads up that you might have a cluster by Friday. The scan catches these signals early. Part 2 is the pick. This takes about 60 seconds. As you walk, you pick off anything that should not be there. One weed coming through the mulch, pull it. A yellowing leaf at the base of a tomato, snap it off. A hornworm on a stem, drop it in your soapy water bucket. 2 squash bug eggs on the back of a leaf, scrape them off with your thumbnail. None of these things takes more than a few seconds individually, and because you are doing it every single day, there is never more than a handful of things to deal with. This is the principle that makes the whole system work. Daily small actions prevent weekly big problems. Part 3 is the water check. This takes about 30 seconds if you have drip irrigation, or about 2 minutes if you are hand watering. If you are on a drip system with a timer, you are just glancing at the emitters to make sure they are not clogged and that the soil looks appropriately moist. Stick your finger an inch into the soil near a couple of plants. If it feels moist, you are good. If it feels dry, your timer might need adjusting, or you might have a clogged emitter. If you are hand watering, give each bed a slow, deep drink at the base of the plants. Do not water the leaves, water the soil. And water in the morning so the foliage has all day to dry, which helps prevent fungal disease. Part 4 is the harvest, and this is the part most people forget to include in their daily routine, which is a mistake. Harvesting is not just the reward, it is maintenance. A zucchini you pick at 6 inches stays tender and delicious, and the plant immediately starts producing the next one. A zucchini you miss for 3 days turns into a baseball bat, and the plant slows down because it thinks its job is done. The same goes for beans, cucumbers, peppers, and leafy greens. Daily harvesting keeps your plants in production mode. It takes about 60 seconds to walk through and pick whatever is ready, and it is the most enjoyable 60 seconds of your entire morning. So that is your 5-minute routine. Scan, pick, water check, harvest. 60 seconds, 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Done. Coffee is still warm. Now let us talk about what to plant so that this garden actually feeds you all year without requiring you to replant the whole thing every few weeks. This is where most people overcomplicate things, and it is where a simple concept called succession planting changes everything. Succession planting just means staggering your plantings so that crops mature at different times instead of all at once. The classic mistake is planting 12 lettuce plants on the same day in April. 3 weeks later, you have 12 heads of lettuce ready at the same time. You eat 3, give away 4, and the other 5 bolt in the heat before you can get to them. Then, you have no lettuce for the rest of the summer. Here is what to do instead. Plant 3 lettuce plants every 2 weeks from early spring through late fall. You always have a few plants ready to harvest, a few that are mid-growth, and a few that just went in. You never have too much at once and you never have a gap. The same principle works for radishes, beans, cucumbers, and any quick-maturing crop. For your year-round garden, I recommend building your plantings around 3 tiers. Your first tier is the backbone crops. These are the long-season plants that go in once and produce for months. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and squash in summer. Kale, collards, and Brussels sprouts in fall and winter. These go in your prime beds, the ones closest to you, and they require the most attention during their peak growing season, but reward you with huge harvests over a long period. Your second tier is the succession crops. These are the fast growers you replant every 2 to 3 weeks for continuous harvest. Lettuce, spinach, radishes, bush beans, and arugula all fall into this category. Keep a small section of one bed dedicated to these and just tuck in a few new seeds or transplants every couple of weeks. It takes about 2 minutes to poke some seeds into the soil, and it keeps fresh greens and quick vegetables coming to your kitchen, non-stop. Your third tier is the set it and forget it crops. These are the plants you put in once, and they either produce for years or take care of themselves with almost zero intervention. Herbs like rosemary, thyme, oregano, and chives are perennial in most zones and will come back year after year. Garlic goes in the ground in fall, and you harvest it the following summer without doing much of anything in between. Asparagus takes a couple of years to establish, but then produces every spring for 15 to 20 years. Rhubarb is the same story. These crops fill in the edges and corners of your garden and give you harvests that require essentially no daily effort. If you are in zones 3 through 6, your year-round strategy will lean heavily on cold hardy greens like kale, spinach, and lettuce through fall and into early winter, protected by row covers or a simple cold frame. In zones 7 through 9, you can grow cool season crops right through winter with little or no protection. In zones 8 and 9, the real challenge is summer heat. So your succession plantings of lettuce and spinach will pause in June and July and resume in September when temperatures drop. Now let us talk about watering and feeding in a way that takes almost no daily thought. I mentioned drip irrigation earlier, and I really do think it is the single best investment you can make in a low-maintenance garden. But whether you use drip or hand water, the key principle is the same. Deep and infrequent beats, shallow and often. Most people water their garden a little bit every day, just enough to wet the top inch or so of soil. That encourages roots to stay shallow, right near the surface where they dry out fastest. What you want instead is to water deeply, but less frequently, so the moisture penetrates down 6 to 8 inches and the roots chase it downward. A plant with deep roots is dramatically more drought-tolerant and resilient than one with shallow roots. For most vegetable gardens, one deep watering every 2 to 3 days is better than a light sprinkle every day. If you are on drip irrigation with a timer, set it to run long enough that the water soaks down at least 6 inches. You can check this by watering, waiting an hour, and then digging a small hole to see how far the moisture reached. Adjust your run time until you are hitting that 6-inch mark consistently. For raised beds with good potting mix or amended soil, you may need to water more frequently in the peak of summer, especially if temperatures are above 90 degrees for extended stretches. Fabric grow bags and raised beds dry out faster than in-ground plantings, so keep that in mind. This is where your daily water check during the 5-minute routine becomes important. You are not guessing. You are sticking your finger in the soil and feeling for yourself. Feeding is even simpler. In early spring, spread 2 to 3 inches of good compost across the top of all your beds and gently work it into the top couple of inches of soil. This is your foundation feeding for the entire season. For your heavy feeders like tomatoes, peppers, squash, and cucumbers, supplement with a liquid organic fertilizer once every 3 to 4 weeks during the active growing season. A fish emulsion or liquid seaweed diluted, according to the label, is all you need. For your lighter feeders like herbs, root vegetables, and legumes, the spring compost is usually enough on its own. Here is a mistake I made for years, and I want to save you from it. I used to forget to feed my fall plantings. I would amend the soil in spring, feed through summer, and then assume the soil still had enough nutrition to carry my fall crops. It did not. By September, those beds had been growing food for 5 months, and the nutrients were depleted. Now I add a fresh 1-inch layer of compost when I transition from summer to fall crops, and the difference in my fall greens is night and day. Thicker leaves, deeper color, better flavor, and much stronger plants going into cold weather. Now let us talk about keeping this garden going through the seasonal transitions, because year-round food production means you cannot just shut things down when the first frost hits. The key is thinking about your garden in 4 overlapping seasons, not 2, and planning your transitions about 4 to 6 weeks ahead. In early spring, zones 3 through 6, you are starting cool season crops like peas, lettuce, spinach, radishes, and kale, either indoors under lights or direct sowing under row cover as soon as the soil is workable. In zones 7 through 9, these crops have been growing through winter, and you are beginning to harvest. In late spring, you are transitioning to warm season crops. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, cucumbers, and beans go in after your last frost date. In zones 3 through 6, this is typically late May. In zones 7 through 9, late March to mid-April. As your cool season crops finish, you pull them and immediately replant those spaces with warm season crops or succession plantings. In late summer, and this is the transition most people miss, you start your fall garden. About 6 to 8 weeks before your first expected frost, start planting cool season crops again. Lettuce, spinach, kale, radishes, turnips, and beets all go in now. These will grow through fall, and in many zones will keep producing well into early winter, especially under row cover or in a cold frame. If you wait until October to think about fall planting, you have already missed the window. The time to plant your fall garden is August. In winter, zones 7 through 9, you are still actively growing cool season crops with little protection needed. Zones 5 and 6, a simple cold frame or row cover will carry kale, spinach, and some lettuces through December, and sometimes into January. Zones 3 and 4, you can extend the season with a cold frame or unheated hoop house, but you will likely have a true dormant period from December through February. That is the time to plan, order seeds, maintain tools, and build compost for spring. Let us talk about some common problems you might run into with this approach. First, you skip the daily walk for a few days and everything falls apart. This is the most common failure, and it is entirely human. Life happens. But here's the thing. If you miss 1 or 2 days, nothing catastrophic happens in a well-designed garden. The mulch is suppressing weeds. The drip system is watering. The succession plantings are staggered. The system has built-in resilience. Just get back to your routine, and do not beat yourself up about it. Where it breaks down is when a few skipped days turns into a skipped week, turns into a skipped month. That is the old pattern. Catch yourself before it slides. Second, you plant too much, and 5 minutes is not enough. This is a design problem, not a discipline problem. Scale back. It is much better to have 2 well-maintained raised beds producing consistently than 6 neglected beds producing nothing. Start small, succeed, and expand later if you want to. Third, your succession plantings keep having gaps. This means your timing is off. The simplest fix is to set a recurring reminder on your phone every 2 weeks that just says, "Plant greens." When the reminder pops up, spend 2 minutes tucking seeds into whatever open space you have. It does not have to be precise. Consistency matters more than perfection. Fourth, your fall garden never gets planted because you are too busy harvesting summer crops. This is incredibly common, and I've done it myself more times than I want to admit. The fix is to start your fall seedlings indoors in pots in late July while the summer garden is still going strong. That way, when you pull a spent tomato or a finished bean row in September, you have transplants ready to go in immediately instead of starting from seed 6 weeks too late. Fifth, you are in a cold climate and the garden feels dead from November through March. This is where a cold frame changes everything. Even a basic one built from a few boards and an old window will keep hardy greens alive through surprisingly cold temperatures. Kale, spinach, and mache can survive down to the low teens under a cold frame. It will not grow much in the dead of winter, but it stays alive, and when the days start lengthening in February, it takes off weeks before anything in the open garden is even thinkable. Now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, this is something I started doing about 2 years ago, and I almost did not mention it because it seems so insignificant. But the results have been impossible to ignore. So here it is. In addition to your 5-minute morning routine, spend 1 minute in the evening doing one thing. Walk out to your garden and look at it from a distance. That is it. Do not pull weeds. Do not pick anything. Do not water. Just look. Here is why this matters. In the morning, you are up close. You are scanning for details, picking off pests, checking soil moisture. That is hands-on, task-oriented time. In the evening, you are seeing the garden as a whole. You notice things from a distance that you miss up close. That bed on the end is looking a little thinner than the others. The tomato plant in the far corner is leaning harder than it was yesterday. The lettuce row that was dark green this morning looks a little pale in the evening light. These are early signals that something is shifting, and noticing them from a distance gives you time to respond before it becomes a problem you have to deal with up close. The evening look also keeps the garden in your mind. It sounds simple, but when your garden is part of your daily rhythm, morning and evening, it never becomes the forgotten project in the backyard that slowly falls apart. It stays front and center, and that consistency is what separates gardens that produce year-round from gardens that peak in July and die in August. 1 minute, just a look. But over the course of a season, it is the difference between reacting to problems and preventing them. Now, what I have shared with you today is a complete framework for running a productive year-round garden on just a few minutes a day. If you want to stop guessing and start a scrap garden that actually keeps producing week after week, I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned about regrowing food from scraps, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this week. It covers which scraps are worth your time and which ones to skip entirely. It gives you the exact setup and method so nothing goes to waste. And it includes the full 30-day calendar with daily tasks so you always know what to do next. There are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. The second way, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your kitchen garden this year. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.